We got news from the land down under. You're going to want to hear what's up on this episode of the Indie Ball Report podcast. All right, we're back again this week, episode number 196 of the Indie Ball Report podcast. I'm Nick. He's Will. We have a Q&A episode coming up in a couple weeks, so get your questions in for that because we already have about 7 or so questions. So we're off to a good start after 1 week. But
that is a good start.
Yeah, I'm surprised. Now, granted, most of them are from the same person, but still, point remains.
I don't care. Questions are questions.
Exactly. That's what I say. But more pressing than that, we do have news in the American Association, pretty much, actually, I think it's exclusively the American Association this week. We got a new partnership, and they're looking for people. So we got some content to talk about in that regard.
Yeah, there are definitely some things to talk about. Not a huge week, but it's getting close to Christmas, and that's kind of what indie ball turns into anyway around this time of year. But still a little bit of news.
Exactly. It just winds up being a dead zone when you get into the winter. And I don't think we really need to go through every single player signing or start discussing all that kind of thing because at the end of the day, everything's so volatile year to year. It doesn't make much sense to do, a deep dive on every signing. I think our previews pretty much cover that department, but yeah, it's winter and that's going to happen. But I guess without, burning any more time, we should get right into the heart of this episode, which is, of course, the newest and latest partnership with the American Association. That is with one of the major winter leagues that we see a lot of indie ball talent going to, and that is, of course, the Australian Baseball League. They announced a partnership program that will see them exchange coaches and staff, have some live streaming, cross promotion, amongst other things as well. If I'm not mistaken, they did something similar with that on more of a temporary, limited basis, either last year or the year prior, if I recall correctly. And, generally speaking, it seems as though you'll have a lot of cross between Australian staff coming in the summer to, work with American Association clubs in the league and vice versa for the winter. So that seems to be a major component of all of this. Likewise, it seems as though we're going to get some Australian games being streamed on the AA Baseball TV platform. Certainly like that. Definitely add some year-round value to that program and to that subscription as well. And it seems like the American Association, or not American Association, the Australian League's video platform will do something similar as well. So it definitely seems like a positive thing on that front. And likewise, I imagine that we will see some other cross-promotional elements too, even if it's just social media or things of that sort. But it is pretty major news, I would say.
Yeah, it's really major news and really exciting news, honestly. It kind of just shows the American Association being on the forefront of a lot of this stuff. And I think that, and for those who don't know, this is a logical fit, I guess, for a partnership between the two leagues, just because a lot of players that are, whether it's the American Association or Atlantic League, Frontier League, whatever, a lot of those guys, a lot of their goals are to get to winter ball. Because you get paid pretty well out there, and of course not everybody can say play in like the Dominican Republic Winter League, like the DR Winter League, where there's where it's just stacked with major league veterans and top prospects. Like if you get to then again you could just be a stud like David Kubiak, go pitch in a rotation in the DR Winter League and just completely shove because he's insane. Yeah. But anyway. I think that it's a really cool partnership because there's a logical fit there. Because in particular, the Australian teams they'll have their native players. And a lot of the time they look to independent leagues primarily for pitching, but they also for other things as well. But pitching's the big part. And I think because it's hard to know like the specifics because you're talking like exchanges, coaches, players, whatnot. Mm-hmm. That's cool. It's like it's not overly specific, I guess. But because there's no like, real numbers attached to it or anything. But I would say that if they can foster a thing where you have guys and you have players and coaches that are very similar, and maybe like the better players on American Association teams are then going to Australia. That is a really positive thing, because I tell you what, that's a really big selling point for a lot of guys who are looking to play indie ball. And that's a big selling point that could differentiate the American Association apart from a lot of other leagues. If they say, hey, like, I mean, our better players are pretty much, I don't know. Again, I don't know if this is the exact wording, but if it were like, all right, you'd be pretty much guaranteed a spot in the American Association with similar coaches as well. I mean, and also Australia, in general, Australia rules. Just like an amazing country. I hope I can go there someday. But I think it's a really exciting partnership, and I think if it is what I think it is, it seems to be something that the American Association can really use to differentiate itself from its league and the other major indie ball leagues. And if they can keep a lot of those coaches and players the same, and it's a really good partnership. And I think it's one that makes a lot of sense for both sides, and for the fans. It's cool on the streaming aspect of it too.
Yep, absolutely. I think the scouting element of it is something that's going to be very present as well. As far as the exact terminology, at least in the press release, it goes, and of course the press release will be linked in the show notes for anyone that wants to read it themselves. Under the partnership terms, the ABL, Australian Baseball League, and AAPB, American Association of Professional Baseball, will engage in an inter-exchange of staff on a year-round basis between member clubs. These staffers will work year-round and transition between Australia and America during the country's respective playing seasons, November to February in Australia, and then May to September in America. Staff may include coaches, groundskeepers, interns. Imagine being an intern and get shipped over to Australia in the middle of the semester. That'd be kind of cool. And any parties who may benefit from such a year-round baseball experience. So it seems to be that pretty much anyone involved in the organization is included in that. I don't think it's necessarily players. It's not at least explicitly listed that players are going to be, like, okay, if you finish in like the top 5% of American Association players in this regard, or top 5% of Australian baseball players in this regard, you go there. But it does seem like in a roundabout way, that is the goal, in that,
eventually, yeah.
Yeah, like, okay, well, the coaching staff from like the Melbourne Bandits or the Perth Heat are going to say, oh, well, if I'm going to go coach over with the Kansas City Monarchs or the King County Cougars, I know that, this particular player here, I'm trying to really resist the urge to make a Crocodile Dundee joke, but like, this guy I know him, he's a good bat, he's a good arm, he's a whatever. I want to bring him over as well. Or flip side here, if you're, on the Chicago Dogs staff, or if you are on the, Lake Country, Dockhound staff, and a guy, it's like, oh, well, yeah, I definitely want to bring over this particular player, this particular guy. I definitely think that could certainly happen. And I think, as you were kind of talking about, Will, I think for guys that are maybe not on the upper end, but I think on the middle tier of winter ball guys, that maybe they don't get as many opportunities. Maybe they're not going to get the shots in, Latin America or the Caribbean. They can certainly be looking now to having a more definite role over in Australia. And I think that's going to really be a positive there. And what I like, especially on this front, is it's kind of growing the brand, right? Like, obviously in Australia, you don't really have minor league baseball. That's not really a thing, because Major League Baseball isn't really a thing, especially in like the months of the year which baseball has, traditionally been played in America, which would be, early spring to early fall. So what essentially you're doing is saying, all right, we're not going to compete with Major League Baseball on a day in, day out basis. But what we can do is you're going to have some fans, because obviously in Australia, if you're watching baseball, a sport that's not exactly native to the country, you're probably, an abnormally diehard fan on it, right? Like you would say for a rugby fan in America, it's not really a native sport to here. It's not a sport that, is really casually followed. If you're into it, you're kind of really into rugby. So you're going to be following your guys. You're going to be following your team. So what this kind of sets up is you're not competing with the MILB guys. You're competing with the guys with the other independent league. So if you can get your guys, your American Association guys, into the Australian League, there's a decent enough chance that you're going to have Australian League fans go, oh, I know Logan Trowbridge from here. I know whomever else it may be playing down there from here. Let me watch the Milwaukee game. Let me watch the Kansas City game. Let me watch the Fargo game to follow those guys. And it definitely helps grow the brand on that sense. And I do very much like that, even if it is only a game or two a week that's being streamed. I definitely think it is something of interest.
Yeah, and I think it's also it's probably more of a fit for those fans out there because I would, at least I would think, with the pretty stark time difference, right? It would be difficult to legitimately follow like Major League Baseball, Minor League Baseball, and whatnot. But I think AA.TV, you have different you have archives, stuff like that. It's a good way to kind of get some familiarity with those players that you might see in Australia. And of course the coaching, and you mentioned the coaching end of things of it's also a plus for those it's also a plus for the native the native Australian players, right? Who can get seen by American Association coaches and staff, and then they can say, hey, I think you're pretty good, like would love to try and bring you to the States during the summer months. So I think that it's a really strong partnership. It's a good it's another real step forward for the American Association, and I think I think it's cool to see them have this type of connection because there is such a natural connection between major independent ball and the Australian Winter League. So I think it's good for fans, like it's good for players, it's good for coaches. It's a really forward thinking change between the two leagues. And I think really both the players that are American players in the American Association win, as well as the Australian players too.
Yeah, I definitely think so. And I think that is a good point too, because I'm not necessarily sure. And I'm, obviously Major League Scouts do their due diligence, but I'm not sure how much time and resources are really being spent in New Zealand, in Australia, in that general region. And certainly not in the greater, Asian region. It's going to be South Korea, Japan, Taiwan. Those areas are going to get the bulk of the scouting, and certainly not, Australia or something along those lines. So I think it definitely does give a great opportunity to those local players, like you're saying, Will, because, now they were often overlooked, I imagine, for a lot of these guys, unless they were truly a standout talent. So now guys that are maybe later developing are going to have a full year of baseball to really be able to prove themselves and have an opportunity to really get in front of a lot of eyes too. So I definitely agree with that. And just out of curiosity, I checked to see what the next live game for the Australian League would be. And it appears as though it is going to be against a Korean team. It is going to be the Geelong Korea versus Brisbane or Brisbane. I believe it's Brisbane, but I don't really know the pronunciation. Yeah, in Queensland, I believe is how that is. But yeah, so that is the one to look out for. It is a 10:30 Central Time start. It appears it's a double header as well, and that is on today. Actually, it's actually later today. So I guess by the time everyone's listening to this, it'll kind of have passed. But you could always go on and take a look at it in the archives. I imagine. I'm sure they're going to log them there too. So, on that front, I think we've just about said everything we have set out to say about this partnership. And we do have a little bit more news this week. Obviously, like we mentioned, it's a slower news week, but we do have some other more, bookkeeping news as well. But we'll move on from the ABL partnership to something else in the American Association, which is they're looking for live content creators. They have a live content creator program. So, I'm going to make an influencer joke to be the title of this week's episode. That's just a given at this point. But if you are in one of the 12 American Association markets, which again are Chicago, Illinois, Cleburne, Texas, Fargo, North Dakota, Gary, Indiana, Geneva, Illinois, Kansas City, Kansas. We're not going to try, but
do it. Try it.
Oconomowoc, Wisconsin, Lake Country, Wisconsin, Lincoln, Milwaukee, sorry about joking, Lincoln, Nebraska, Milwaukee, Wisconsin, Sioux City, Iowa, Sioux Falls, South Dakota, or Winnipeg, Manitoba, and the great nation of Canada. You will have an opportunity to get some game day creation content. This is seemingly more or less an internship program that's ran by the league, I'd imagine, because they want to be able to have content from each of these markets for the social media pages, for the weekend wrap-ups, the whip-arounds, those kinds of things. So it seems to be more like that, but you'll also be with working with other people. So you'll be combining things. If the Sioux Falls market with the Lincoln market, y'all can kind of work together. It would appear as though, and there's different roles here. There's video, photography, and then there's the other category, which seems to be more grunt work. With video, you're going to be capturing the video of on the field play and the experience. So that's kind of more the fun thing, at least in my opinion, because you're able to kind of more interact with players and get a little bit more creative and try some newer and different things. So you get some opportunity to do some different things there on the video end. With the photography, this is secondary to video content. When applicable, you're going to try and take some pictures of fans and players in action. So that's more or less just kind of, it's photography. It's pretty basic. It's not really your primary responsibility in this role. And then in the other category, you're just kind of uploading and labeling things. You're doing all the boring stuff that every first or second year comm student learns to do and hates doing, because logging things is just such a god awful boring experience. It's not hard. It's just so damn boring to log any sort of footage. So yeah, you're just going to upload it, then you're going to label it, you're going to categorize it, all into the central holding place for the league. And then if you want, you can go ahead and make some, short form video clips or photo concepts. In other words, some fancy Photoshop stuff in Photoshop and Illustrator, and some TikToks and stuff like that. So if it sounds interesting and you're in one of those markets, be sure to check it out.
I think a lot of leagues are trying to move forward in that sense to try and, appeal to, younger generations and get better on social media. And certainly in the American Association, they're probably the best league on social media to begin with, and the way that they market themselves, the way they market their teams, players, stadiums, anything else really. So, it just seems like another opportunity to try and make that happen. And I love nothing is I love I'm not talented enough to do it at all, but when people can put together what do I call it? They're videos. I mean, they're not edits. They're videos where they have music in the background.
Kind of like the hype videos.
Highlight videos, but
are you talking montages or
something like that? I know exactly what I'm thinking, but I can't really have the words to describe it, which I know is not helpful at all. But I think that you're trying to get more digital, and it's something that that I know I've talked about at length on the show, and we have as well, and just that finding different ways to market the product on the field, to kind of show, I guess, the personalities in it for one, and two, the talent, and finding different ways to show video wise is always a good idea. So, think it's really cool. I'm not talented enough to do it, with a camera or anything like that, or I'm not on TikTok. I don't know anything about that world, but it's just another way that the American Association is looking to move forward.
Yeah. And I don't mean to sound too much like I'm stumping for the American Association here, because obviously, if they do something wrong, we point it out, and that goes for any league here. But it does seem like they're very tech forward in this. It seems like you would actually get a pretty large portfolio, and at least from my understanding with a lot of these types of things is, you get to use these things to build up a portfolio. So if you're particularly, say, a college student that's that either lives in your college town year round, because I know Lincoln's in that grouping there, and there's a couple other markets in the association that are like this as well. Or if you're going home for the summer, this does seem like a pretty fun internship if you're into baseball. It seems like the kind of thing that could really be interesting. Now, obviously, it's a lot of games you're working. It's 50 games in that market that you're going to be doing. I'd imagine you're not responsible for all the team's games. You're just responsible for the games in that market. So you're probably looking at over the course of the season, probably 75, 85 days of work, I would say, in that regard. But I mean, a lot of it's spent at a ballpark. And like I said, you get to build a good portfolio here. And, overall, it just seems like a really cool opportunity here. I'd agree. I'm not the most talented video editor. I'm all right at it. And I certainly am not a great graphic designer, as shown by the title cards on each of these episodes.
It does the job.
Exactly. That's exactly what it does. It gets the job done, but it's not winning any awards. So at the same time, it's not something I could do. It's not something that Will says he could do. So, if you are kind of a good graphic designer, you want to get kind of a foot going in the league, it's certainly a possibility. I mean, if you look at because I've been looking to try and get guests on, and we're actually in the process of talking to guys, and I got a response from one of the people I emailed. I'll tell you about that when we get off air. But, two people actually, my mistake too. But, I look at a lot of these profiles because that's where, the contact information typically is. And a lot of times started as an intern, then went to ticket sale, and then he became an assistant GM, and now he's the GM of the team. So it certainly seems to me like if you got an internship with the league and you're looking to kind of get into more of the actual baseball ops type of thing, if you're working for a league and you do a good job, it seems to me hey, maybe you get recognized either by the market that you're working in or by the league as a whole. And then when there's an opening, then hey, we got this guy, we know what he's about. Maybe you want to look into him as a possibility, at least it's worth an interview. And so it could be a foot in the door thing. And again, I don't mean to sound like I'm going overboard on it, but just in the context of the story, it's a possibility and something to consider if you're in one of the markets.
Yeah, for sure. I think it's definitely a good way to kind of get your foot in the door with teams and understand how they operate and stuff like that. So, it seems like a really cool opportunity. And, if that's something that you want to do and you're talented, I guess, editing wise and stuff like that. Again, I know the very basics of it, but yeah, it seems like a really cool opportunity, and just to kind of, as a foot in the door, especially for a lot of these teams.
Exactly. So on that note, despite only being about 23 minutes in, we really don't have any other news. I mean, we have a couple of indie ball guys signing actual contracts. Dave Robertson being the kind of big fish with the 1 year, $10 million deal with the Mets. That's kind of cool. There really isn't too much else going on, to put it that way. Hopefully there'll be more news going forward here because, short shows are not that interesting, but hey, there's nothing that we could really do.
Yeah, I know. The Robertson story is cool though. And I know it's a little bit different in the sense that he was preparing for, Team USA, when he was with High Point. So, I mean, obviously he was signed and he was the closer. He wasn't there too long, but, I think it was, it's a really cool story to kind of see that, and he'll probably be you'd think one of the 7th, 8th inning guys for the Mets this year too. So,
yeah.
It just shows you can use indie ball as a bridge to get back into, really kind of get back into affiliated ball and get back on a major league roster. We've seen it happen before. Obviously, Robertson had a pretty massive track record beforehand.
Yeah.
And as the setup guy to Mariano Rivera for many years. But I think that it's a really cool story, and kind of just shows that, really, regardless of the league, you can, and indie ball is a good stepping stone to get back into it, show that your stuff's still there, and then get another shot, and then maybe you'll get $10 million like David Robertson. Probably a rare thing, but it's possible.
Hey, anything's possible, really. And, I mean, Julio Teheran took advantage of his short stint in Staten Island, too. You know, it's a nice story to see for the Atlantic League, too. They need to pick me up, too. You know, hopefully we'll be able to do on the content creator stories for them soon. That'd be nice. You know, it's certainly a model that I think would work, especially given that I feel like their teams are, you know, a little bit more established, too. So I think they could really do some cool stuff there. And, yeah, no, it's good to see that. Plus, former major leaguer, Josh Lucas. That's it. Yeah, Josh Lucas went from Winnipeg to Gateway as well. That's kind of cool. Seeing we got another former major leaguer in the Frontier League. Normally we don't get too many of them, but, you know, got one there now. That's kind of nice.
Yeah, no, it's certainly a lot of good stories like that. And, you know, to really go on top of some of the more classic Rich Hill stories or Scott Kazmir stories. And I know those are just Atlantic League examples, but even talks like Nick Anderson playing in
the Rays.
Yeah. Was he in the front? Did he also in the American Association? I know he's in the Frontier.
I don't know if he won American.
He was in one of them.
And then
Tyler Matzik.
How can we forget about Matzik? Matzik's the only success story to come out of the Texas Air Hogs organization.
Not even only major leaguer. It honestly seems like one of the only good baseball players they've ever had.
I don't know. I wouldn't necessarily go that far, but certainly one of the very few that actually, like I said, my time in Texas was a positive. There's not too many that could quite say that. You know. Yeah,
that was a hell of a team.
Why? Because they were putting up Frontier Gray. Oh, no, it's quite Frontier Gray type numbers. Yeah, they were certainly putting up Houston Apollo-esque numbers, which is not good as a permanent team.
No, not good. What was that? The partnership with the Chinese professional baseball.
Yeah,
and those players just sucked.
Yeah, and they needed the money, so they kept doing it, but it made it worse. Oh god, yeah, and then building. Oh god, and then the whole
stadium. What
are they
building that stadium again?
I think they put cricket over there.
Yes, that's what it is. Cricket.
Yeah, and really, I think at the end of the day, we could really question building a giant reflective stadium in the middle of Texas to play baseball in. At least when you look at Cleveland Stadium, it's okay, there's some muted colors and whatnot. It still is a pretty stadium, don't get me wrong, but it's not the kind of stadium that's going to attract a lot of heat. When you look at the Air Hawks Stadium, it was this thing's mostly metal. This is going to be miserable to see a game in.
Bleachers and that. Did it have metal bleachers?
Yeah. Even when the sun goes down, it's still going to be warm. It's going to be uncomfortable as hell.
Oh God.
Yeah.
No, it's tough.
Yeah, that was a suck. I remember having to be in the middle of editing and then they shut down and I was oh well, we gotta go record an extra piece. The week just changed.
I remember that.
Yeah. Wasn't that fun? I was Texas just shut down. I think we should probably record an extra.
Well, emergency pod.
Yeah, and we had to cut into the early bit. That was fun.
Emergency press conference.
Yeah. But, so I guess with that, we won't waste any more time. We'll just, get into the outro. It's weird to be doing an outro before the 30-minute mark. I don't think we've had a podcast this short in a while, but...
Q&A soon, though. Yeah,
Q&A is soon. It's 2 weeks away. December 23rd is when it's getting recorded, so we'd appreciate you getting your questions in by December 22nd. I'm going to start loading those questions, too, into a Google Doc, and I'll share it with you so that way you can see them, too. That'd probably be helpful.
That would be good.
Yep. So we'll do that. But if you have questions, send them in either via the social media at Indie Ball Report on Instagram, at IndieBallPod on Twitter, or you can send them in via email, indieballreport@gmail.com. Those are all great places to send them. We'll make sure we get them. We'll get them written down. All will be well and good on that front. So be sure to get those in there as well. As far as other promotions, I already mentioned the Twitter. I mentioned the Instagram, Will's Instagram at ALPB_news. If you want to follow that. Likewise, if you want to follow the show, I'm not sure where you're listening now, but we're also on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, Stitcher, pretty sure TuneIn as well. Pretty much all the major ones, Amazon Music. We're on all the major platforms as well as iHeart too, which is kind of cool. But yeah, just follow wherever you get the show, and if you can, rate, review, subscribe. You know, the usual deal. Do all that. Yeah, and the website's got the show notes, links to both stories today. They're there. Yeah, and contact information's there as well. I should probably have some more content up on the website fairly soon. I'm just kind of working through some other more important things to finish writing, and then I'll write out the whole manager chart thing. We'll get all that up and squared away. So that's the note. Looking at probably, I don't want to say probably getting an interview next week, but there is a decent shot at getting one next week. And certainly going forward, there's going to be a lot. Like I said, I reached out to like 5 or 6 different people, and we've heard back from about 2 or 3 of them so far. So we're doing pretty good on that front. I got to reach out to 2 or 3 more people as well to get all that squared away. But we should be back to interviews soon. And obviously on weeks like this, having a nice 45-minute interview would help out a lot. But, you know, not always going to happen. So, yeah. With that said, do we have anything else left to add?
Rutgers got a win stolen from them last night at Ohio State. Really sad. Very sad that Big Ten officials wanted to give the win to Ohio State. That was not fun. But you know what? Rutgers will then take out their anger on the poor Seton Hall Pirates at the rack on Sunday night. So that's all I have to say. I'm very, very disappointed that the refs missed a guy clearly stepping out of bounds before hitting a buzzer beater 3. So you'd hope, a ref's right on top of it can see whether a guy steps out of bounds or not. You'd think that's one of the easier calls you could make. But, didn't happen. So long season, move on. And Seton Hall will pay the price for it.
Couple points of note. One, we both know that it's very difficult to tell inbounds and out of bounds. We were both at that Iowa game, and we saw...
Oh my God!
The one where the guy's
the worst ones I've ever seen.
Yeah, he's out of bounds. Meanwhile, there's 4 inches between the baseline and his foot. That was egregious. Good thing they overturned that, though. That was a good
They did
review.
Overturn it. So, that was one of the worst ones I think I've seen. Like, it was not even close.
Well, you can also tell the ref knew he messed up immediately after, because he was like, go to review. That's my bad. I think he was just like, I can't tell. Obviously in the split second, he was like, let me blow it dead, because if it's not, if I make the wrong call, we can overturn this. So let me play the safe call. And obviously it worked out fine for Illinois. I mean,
Yeah.
So it was fine there. Second point, you're going to be at the rack watching Seton Hall and Rutgers, or is that just not going to be in the cards?
So I wish I could. The problem is I'm actually broadcasting Hofstra versus UMass at Barclays Center on Sunday night.
Oh, wow.
So
fancy.
I will probably not even be able to watch much of the game. I'm just hoping that they win.
So here's what I think. A, where could people listen to this if they wanted to listen to it?
Ooh. Well, I think stream. Oh God, what's the URL?
He wasn't ready for that smooth Jeremy Roach pass.
No, he was. Stream WRHU.net. So that's like the word stream, the letters WRHU.net. That's where it started. Games at 7, but it's a 4-game showcase. Therefore, things could get pushed back. But around there, that's when that game starts. If you want to listen to me describe what is happening in Hofstra versus UMass, which is actually a very good game between 2 really good mid-major teams at the moment. So Frank Martin, the old South Carolina coaches UMass now.
About that.
So yeah, it should be a fun game.
So I'll have to tweet your Rutgers, or I'll have to text your Rutgers Seton Hall updates, and then
Honestly,
I want everyone.
need 'em.
And then I'm trying to remember to retweet the link to make it easier for people to listen to. That's Sunday, right? Sunday at 7?
Sunday night, yeah.
All right, good. So I'll retweet that. But the real point of emphasis I wanted to hit here is I'm not sure why you're upset about a Rutgers loss when you're clearly a member of the Brotherhood. I've seen it with my own two eyes now,
Because I was at the Duke game with you? Is that how that works?
And you seem to be pulling for the Blue Devils there over Iowa, so...
Oh, I can't stand Iowa, but I also can't stand Duke. So...
I don't know about that. We have it on record that you're a big Brotherhood fan.
I'm a big Jason Tatum fan.
That sounds like a big Brotherhood fan to me.
Well... I'm a fan of Jason Tatum. That's all I can say.
And what's a real shame is not 5 minutes after you left because you had to catch a train, they did that every time we touch.
It's criminal.
I'm pretty sure you were on an escalator when they were doing that.
Absolutely criminal.
Yeah. It's like you left 5 minutes later, like at the next play stoppage, the band did the every time we touch. Because Duke was the only one that brought their band because they're not a poverty state school like the other three playing.
Illinois traveled pretty well for that game.
I was surprised. Here's the thing, Iowa didn't show up at all, which is fine. They probably got lost in a cornfield, so that's understandable. As far as the other two fan bases, they both have major cities in there, so they probably just went to there and then flew. But I could kind of get that because if you really think about it, it's December 6th. So it's middle of the week. So, well, yeah, it's still like Christmas season. So you're going to have Christmas inflation on hotels in New York. It's probably not as bad. If you fly in, say, Monday, you'll leave on like Thursday or something. You make it like a 3 or 4 day vacation in the city. You do all the touristy stuff. You see the tree. You go to Fifth Ave. You go Empire State Building, although Freedom Tower is better for a view because you actually get to see more and it's higher. You do Central Park, you do all the touristy crap that everyone from New York and New Jersey did once and then said, why, what's the appeal here? Then you go to Times Square and you get accosted by costumed wearing idiots. It's a real fun time. But you go ahead, you make it a whole vacation thing and then you go back home afterwards and you just kind of plan it around the game. I know people have done that in the past because when I went to the North Dakota Boston College game at the Garden, a lot of North Dakota people did that. They were like, oh, well, we just went out as a group and said, oh, we'll see the tree. We'll do all this stuff. And I was thinking, people vacation in New York? Like, it's just such a foreign concept to me growing up, like less than 20 miles from the city. It's like such a foreign concept that you would plan a vacation for New York. Like, I get it, but.
That makes sense, actually, yeah.
Yeah, because I think it's just because, if I want to go into New York, it's like, oh, well, let me just go catch a train. It could very much be a last minute decision to be like, oh, yeah, I'm just going to go into the city. And it's not like any sort of planning, but I guess it's kind of like the same way if you live by a beach. You're like, why do people vacation here? But, because you live there year round, so it's always there. So it's just kind of a weird thing.
Yeah, I could see that, but yeah, Duke fans obviously showed up as I guess expected.
Oh yeah, it was kind of fun though. You watched the arena gradually fill in as the Illinois game started to dwindle down. You're just like, oh, there's a lot more blue in this arena.
Yeah, no, exactly. Why is there blue? Lots of blue in the crowd, again with 2 orange teams playing.
Yeah. But keeping tabs, I saw 1 Leitner jersey, a couple of Zion jerseys, a few Cam Reddish jerseys, which I was kind of surprised about, a few Tatum jerseys, which made sense. And, that was really the sum of all the jerseys I saw. So it was kind of interesting to see the different types of jerseys. I was really surprised there was only 1 Christian Leitner jersey because he's a beloved Rogue alongside Grayson Allen.
I'm going to keep my comments to myself.
Wow, you don't love beloved Duke players Grayson Allen and Christian Leitner?
Leitner I don't really care about, but Grayson Allen just sucks eggs.
I don't know about that. He's a beloved Rogue. I just don't see how anyone could dislike Grayson Allen. He's a lovable character.
Something like that.
Something like that. Yeah. But, all right. We're nearly at 40 minutes. I feel comfortable calling it here. We'll have the Q&A episode in 2 weeks, so send your questions in. Hopefully we'll have an interview next week. I'm pretty confident we will. And, until next time, don't forget to play ball.